I'll give you everything you fear, the billionaire warned his innocent bride. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain had not stopped since morning. Outside the tall glass windows of the Blackwell Hotel, lightning flashed across the New York skyline. Inside, the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the air. Every table glowed under golden light, every guest perfectly dressed. It looked like a scene from a magazine until you noticed the bride. Elena Moore stood at the end of the marble aisle, pale fingers gripping a bouquet of white lilies. Her wedding dress shimmered under the chandelier, but her eyes looked distant, searching for a reason to breathe. Across from her stood Adrian Blackwell, the billionaire CEO known for his icy control and rumored tragedies. His tuxedo was flawless, but his expression was unreadable. When the priest asked him to speak, Adrian's voice was calm, steady, and cold enough to make the guests lean forward. "I will give you everything you fear," he said. A murmur rippled through the room. Some smiled politely, thinking it was poetic. But Elena felt the weight of those words settle deep inside her chest. What did he mean, everything she feared? The cameras flashed, the applause began, and yet, standing beside the man every woman in New York envied, Elena felt nothing but dread. 3 days earlier, she had been just another overworked assistant at Blackwell Industries, surviving on instant coffee and the dream of paying her mother's hospital bills. She never expected a summons to the top floor of the company's headquarters, a place she had only seen in photos. The message had been brief. Report to the CEO's office at 8 p.m. regarding a private matter. She remembered walking through the glass doors that night, the city lights reflecting off the floor like stars trapped beneath her feet. She remembered the silence of that penthouse, the scent of expensive cologne, the man sitting behind the desk. Adrian Blackwell did not look up right away. He only said, "You made a mistake on the Callahan project. Sit down." But when she tried to explain, he cut her off, his tone sharper than the storm outside. "I did not call you here about numbers. I need something that cannot be done by anyone else." He finally looked at her then, and for the first time she saw what people meant when they called him intimidating. His eyes were the color of winter. "I need a wife," he said simply. Elena thought she had misheard him. A wife? She had laughed, then stopped when she realized he was serious. He spoke of contracts, reputations, and a family trust clause that demanded a marriage before the fiscal year ended. She was the only employee with no public ties, no scandals, no history. "I will pay off your debts," he said. "Your mother's treatment, your rent, all of it. In return, you will stand beside me for 1 year. After that, we both walk away." Her hands had trembled as she looked at the document he slid across the desk. Every number on that page was enough to save her life and her mother's. Now, standing in a sea of flowers and flashbulbs, Elena realized she had signed her freedom away for a future she could not predict. The billionaire beside her had warned her once, "I will give you everything you fear." And as thunder rolled above the city, she began to understand he might just keep his word. That night after the wedding, the city never truly slept. Lights from the skyscrapers shimmered across the Hudson River like restless thoughts, and somewhere inside the tallest of them, Elena Moore sat alone on the edge of a grand bed she did not belong to. The silk sheets were soft, untouched. Her suitcase remained closed at her feet. Outside her window, thunder rolled again. She could see the glow of Manhattan far below, alive and loud. But in this penthouse everything was quiet, too quiet. A single wedding photo stood on the dresser. In it, she smiled like a stranger. The door opened softly behind her. Adrian Blackwell entered without a word, still in his black suit, tie undone, collar open. He looked like someone who had forgotten how to rest. For a long moment he said nothing. The tension between them hung in the air like smoke. "You should sleep," he said finally. "I am not tired," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I do not usually sleep well in other people's houses." He glanced at her reflection in the window. "This is not a house. It is an arrangement." "I know." He moved closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "There are rules, Elena. You will have your own space, your own card, your own schedule. We appear together when needed, and when the year is over, you walk away. Nothing more. nothing less. Elena turned toward him, the city lights painting faint gold on her face. "And what do you get out of this besides saving your reputation?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Control. That is all I have ever wanted." The words stung more than she expected. She nodded slowly and whispered, "Then I guess we both sold something tonight." He looked at her for a long time before leaving the room. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. When the door clicked shut, Elena released the breath she had been holding. She pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall over her shoulders, and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back wore a diamond ring and eyes that no longer looked like hers. The next morning, she woke early to the sound of rain against the glass. A breakfast tray had been left at her door-fruit toast and a handwritten note. "Be ready at 10. We have an appearance." No signature, just the initials A.B. She followed the note's instructions, dressing in a pale blue dress chosen by his assistant. By 10 o'clock, a sleek car waited downstairs. Adrian was already inside, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when she entered. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," he answered, voice distant. "We are visiting the Blackwell Foundation. Cameras will be there. Stay close, smile when needed. You are not required to speak unless I cue you." Elena looked out the window as the car pulled into the stream of traffic. She had imagined what being the wife of a billionaire might look like: elegant, graceful, maybe even safe. But sitting beside him now, she felt like a passenger in someone else's life. At the charity event, flashbulbs followed them through the marble lobby. Adrian's hand rested lightly on her back, a practiced gesture for the cameras. Reporters shouted questions. He answered with polite, distant charm. To the world, they looked perfect. To her, it felt like a scene rehearsed too many times. When the crowd finally dispersed, he excused himself to speak with a board member, leaving her near a wall of portraits. As she wandered, her eyes landed on a painting at the end of the corridor, a woman's face, half-finished, strokes of deep blue and gray. Something about it pulled her closer. The plaque read "Artist A. Blackwell." Her chest tightened. So he painted. The thought seemed almost impossible. Beneath the precision of his suits, beneath the power he wielded so easily, there had once been an artist. "Beautiful, is it not?" a voice said behind her. She turned to see an older woman, the gallery curator. "Mr. Blackwell used to donate his paintings here before the woman hesitated, lowering her voice. "Before his wife's accident." Elena froze. "His wife?" The woman nodded, whispering. "Victoria Hale. She died 3 years ago. Tragic story. He never spoke about her again." Before Elena could respond, Adrian appeared beside them, calm and unreadable. "We are leaving," he said. His tone made it clear there was no discussion. Back in the car, silence pressed heavy between them. She looked out at the rain, heart racing, questions forming faster than she could stop them. He finally broke the silence. "Do not go wandering into rooms that do not belong to you." She turned to him. "Maybe you should lock them if you do not want people to see what you hide." His eyes flickered toward her, cold and sharp. "Careful, Mrs. Blackwell. Curiosity can be dangerous." She met his gaze without fear. "So can secrets." The car stopped at a red light. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, rain traced thin lines down the glass, and inside, two strangers sat side by side, bound by a contract, divided by everything they refused to admit. The next few days passed in silence. The mansion in Vermont was surrounded by pine trees and wrapped in fog that rolled across the hills each morning. The air smelled of rain and pine resin, and the house itself felt like a museum of memories that did not belong to her. Every corridor was lined with old paintings, every clock ticked in perfect rhythm, as if time itself obeyed Adrian Blackwell. Elena spent her days walking through the echoing halls, followed everywhere by the quiet hum of cameras she could almost feel but never see. The staff greeted her politely but never met her eyes for long. Every gesture was rehearsed, every smile fragile. On the third night, she wandered into a part of the mansion she had not explored before. A narrow staircase led upward, its banister cold under her hand. At the top was a door slightly ajar, the faint smell of turpentine drifting from inside. She pushed the door open. The room beyond was dimly lit, dust floating in the air like fading stars. It was a studio, spacious, quiet, untouched for years. Easels stood in a corner, brushes arranged neatly beside jars of dried paint, and on one wall hung a massive unfinished portrait. It was a woman's face, serene yet haunting. The lower half of the canvas was scratched and scraped, as if someone had tried to erase it. The signature in the corner was small but clear. A. Blackwell. Elena stepped closer, her heart pounding. The face looked familiar. The curve of the mouth, the softness in the eyes, it almost looked like her own reflection. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the dry paint. "You should not be here." The voice came from the doorway. She turned quickly. Adrian stood there, his expression unreadable, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his gaze colder than the room. "I was just looking," she said quietly. "I can see that," he replied, walking toward her. "Most people do not enter a locked room by accident." It was not locked. He stopped in front of the painting, eyes fixed on the image. "It used to be," he murmured, almost to himself, until someone forgot to turn the key. Elena looked between him and the portrait. "Who is she?" His jaw tightened. "No one you need to know." "It looks like me," she whispered. For the first time, a shadow of emotion crossed his face. "That is exactly the problem." He turned away, reaching for a cloth to cover the canvas. "You will stay out of this room, Elena. There are memories here that do not belong to you." Her voice trembled slightly, but she stood her ground. "You keep saying what does not belong to me, what I cannot see, what I should not know. Tell me, Adrian, is there anything in this house that is actually mine?" He turned sharply, and for a heartbeat she saw something raw flicker behind his calm mask pain. Guilt, something that almost looked like fear. But then it was gone. "Dinner is at 7, he said, walking past her. "Wear something black." When he left, she remained still, staring at the covered painting. The sound of his footsteps faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. That evening, she sat across from him at the long dining table. The food was exquisite, the silverware gleaming under candlelight, but the silence between them was louder than any storm. Finally, she spoke. "The woman in the painting, was she your wife?" His knife froze midair. "Yes," he said after a moment. "Her name was Victoria." "What happened to her?" "She died," he answered flatly. "That is all you need to know." Elena's voice softened. "I saw how you looked at that painting. You still care about her." He leaned back, his eyes meeting hers. "Care? That is not the word I would use." "Then what word fits?" He set his knife down slowly, the metal ringing against the plate. "Regret." The rest of the dinner passed in silence. Later, unable to sleep, Elena walked to the balcony. The air was cool, and mist rose from the lake below. She wrapped her arms around herself, thinking of the man who slept down the hall, powerful, unreachable, and yet bound by ghosts. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and for a split second, she saw movement near the tree line below the estate, someone standing there watching. The next flash revealed nothing. The figure was gone. The next morning, Adrian was already in the garden, sleeves rolled, talking to the caretaker. He looked up as she stepped outside, his eyes softening slightly. "You are up early." "I could not sleep," she admitted. "This place feels haunted." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "That is not far from the truth." They walked along the gravel path in silence until she asked quietly, "Did you ever paint after she died?" He shook his head. "I tried once. Everything I made turned into her face." "Maybe you should try again," she said softly, "not to forget her, but to remember yourself." For a moment he looked at her as if seeing her differently. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the fragile quiet. He turned away, taking the call, his voice low and tense. Elena continued walking, her eyes drawn back to the lake. The surface shimmered under the morning light, calm on the outside, deep and restless beneath, just like the man she had married. Inside the mansion, behind the locked studio door, the covered painting shifted slightly in the draft, revealing the corner of another portrait underneath it. It was not Victoria's face this time. It was Elena's, unfinished, haunting, and signed with the same name, A. Blackwell. Somewhere in that quiet house, secrets were still breathing, waiting to be found. Days turned into weeks inside the Blackwell mansion. What had begun as an arrangement started to feel like a strange kind of captivity. Yet, beneath the silence and rules, something subtle had shifted. Adrian was no longer just the cold man behind contracts and wealth. He was a man who avoided mirrors, who carried guilt like a shadow, and who seemed to find reasons to linger when she was near. Elena noticed small things. He no longer corrected her tone when she spoke to him at dinner. He began leaving books on the table that he thought she might like. Once, she caught him watching her in the garden, expression unreadable, before quietly turning away. It was on one of those gray mornings that the storm inside the mansion truly began. Elena was sketching by the window when she heard raised voices in the hall. The staff rarely argued, but this time it was urgent. She stepped out to see the butler whispering to a maid, both pale. When they saw her, they froze. "What is it?" she asked. The maid hesitated. "A visitor, ma'am. Mr. Blackwell's lawyer is here. He said something about a change in the will." Elena frowned. A change? Before she could ask more, Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs, his presence instantly silencing the staff. "Return to your duties," he ordered. His tone was calm, but his eyes carried warning. The butler bowed quickly and left. Adrian turned to Elena. "You do not need to involve yourself in matters that do not concern you." She met his gaze. "Everything in this house concerns me now. I am your wife, at least in name." His lips twitched, almost a smirk. "In name only. Do not mistake the title for power." She stepped closer. "Then what is the point of this marriage, Adrian? A trophy, a shield, or a punishment you cannot stop giving yourself?" For a second, she saw the mask crack. He exhaled sharply, turning away. "You do not understand." "Then make me understand," she said. "Because from where I stand, you are the one who looks trapped." He paused at the bottom of the staircase. "There are truths that once spoken cannot be undone." His eyes darkened. "You are safer not knowing them." That night she could not stop thinking about his words. She found herself walking the halls again, the soft light from the chandeliers stretching long shadows on the floor. Something about the mansion felt restless, as if it was holding its breath. Her steps led her to the study. The door was half open, and she heard Adrian's voice inside. "She is starting to ask questions," he said quietly. A second voice answered, an older man. "You cannot hide forever. The past has a way of resurfacing." "She is not supposed to get involved," Adrian said, frustration rising. "The marriage was meant to protect the company, not reopen graves." The other man sighed. "Then perhaps you should have told her the truth before it finds her first." The sound of glass clinking ended the conversation. Elena stepped back, her pulse racing. The truth, the will, the painting, everything was connected. She returned to her room, heart pounding. On her dresser lay a folded note, no signature, just a sentence written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "The truth is not buried, it is waiting." The next morning, she found Adrian in the greenhouse, tending to the white lilies planted by the window. "Why did you marry me, really?" she asked. He looked up, his voice quiet. "Because you reminded me that I was still alive." The answer left her stunned. "And your wife, Victoria?" His expression hardened again. "She is gone, but you did not say she was dead." He stared at her for a long moment before saying softly, "Do not push me, Elena." She took a deep breath, stepping closer until she stood right in front of him. "You warned me once that you would give me everything I fear, but maybe the thing you fear most is not me. Maybe it is the truth itself." For the first time, he could not look at her. His hands clenched around the stems of the lilies until a petal fell, landing between them. Later that evening, as she walked through the gallery, she noticed a painting missing from the wall, the portrait of Victoria Hale. The empty space left behind was covered with a fresh frame draped in cloth. When she reached out to lift the corner, Adrian's voice came from behind her. "Something should stay hidden," he said quietly. She turned, startled. "Then why paint them at all?" He hesitated. "Because hiding does not mean forgetting." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. The distance between them felt fragile, charged. It was not love, not yet, but it was the first sign that both of them were starting to see the cracks in the lives they had built. Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing across the valley, as if the storm that had begun on their wedding night was finally finding its way back to them. The storm passed overnight, but the air around the Blackwell mansion stayed heavy, as if the rain had washed everything except the tension away. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the tall windows and spread across the marble floors, pale and cold. Elena Moore woke to the sound of quiet footsteps in the hallway. Someone had left breakfast at her door again, but this time there was no note. She sat by the window, watching the mist fade from the lake below. Somewhere in that silence, she began to realize how little she actually knew about the man she had married. Every day revealed something different, an act of kindness hidden beneath discipline, or a scar beneath his calm. He was both protector and prisoner, and she could not tell which side he wanted her to see. Later that day, she found him in the library. Adrian Blackwell was standing near the fireplace, sleeves rolled, studying a folder of documents. The flames cast light across his face, softening the sharpness that usually made people step back. You look like you have not slept, Elena said quietly. He closed the folder. Neither have you. I keep thinking about the painting, she admitted. About your wife. His eyes flickered toward the window. Some ghosts refuse to leave, he said, especially when they died without answers. You said she died in an accident, Elena said. But people do not look that haunted over an accident. Adrian turned to her slowly. What do you want from me, Elena? A confession? Or the truth you think you can handle? She met his gaze. The truth does not scare me. A bitter smile touched his lips. Then you are the first person who ever said that to me. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his expression shifting from irritation to something darker. I have to take this, he said, stepping out of the room. Elena waited, listening to his voice through the half-open door. She could not hear the words, but his tone was sharp, urgent. Then the sound of breaking glass followed a crash, a curse, and the line went dead. When he returned, his jaw was tight. An internal audit, he said shortly. Someone is trying to reopen an old investigation. About your wife? She asked. His silence was the answer. That evening, Adrian invited her to accompany him to a local charity auction in town. It was their first public appearance since the wedding. She wore a black silk dress, simple but elegant, and he offered his arm with a formality that felt almost gentle. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, filled with laughter, music, and too many curious eyes. Every glance carried a whisper, the billionaire's new bride, the replacement, the mystery. As they moved through the crowd, a reporter approached with a microphone. Mr. Blackwell, it is wonderful to see you again, she said brightly. And your wife. Such a surprise. You seem different. Happier, perhaps? Adrian's polite smile never faltered. Happiness is relative, he replied. The reporter tilted her head. Rumor says the Blackwell Trust might reopen the case from 3 years ago. Any comment? Elena saw his hand tighten around the glass in his other hand. Rumors, he said evenly, are for those with nothing better to do. The woman laughed awkwardly and moved on. Elena could feel his anger simmering just beneath the surface. When the music slowed, he leaned closer to her ear. Smile for the cameras, he whispered. And when this is over, do not ask me about tonight. But curiosity had already taken root. Later, when he excused himself to speak with an investor, Elena slipped toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. There, near the exit, stood an older woman dressed in silver. Her face was pale but elegant, her eyes sharp. You must be the new Mrs. Blackwell, the woman said softly. I knew the last one quite well. Elena froze. You knew Victoria? The woman nodded. I was there the night she disappeared. She was afraid, you know. Not of death of him. Before Elena could respond, a hand touched her shoulder. Adrian stood behind her, his expression dark. Mrs. Hale, that is enough. The woman gave a faint smile. Always the protector, Adrian. But you cannot protect her from what is already coming. Adrian led Elena away without a word. The drive back to the mansion was silent. When they reached the gate, she finally spoke. Was she telling the truth? He looked straight ahead. Do not listen to people who live off other people's tragedies. Then tell me yours, she said softly. He parked the car and turned to her, his eyes tired, almost pleading. You think you want to know, but every truth in my life ends in ruin. Do you really want that? Elena's heart pounded. Yes. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he said quietly, if you keep digging, you will not like what you find, and neither will I. He stepped out of the car, walking toward the house, leaving her alone in the glow of the dashboard lights. The wind carried the scent of rain again, and in that lonely silence, Elena realized something chilling. The more she tried to understand the man she had married, the more she felt that someone else, someone unseen, was also watching, waiting for her to uncover the truth he refused to speak. The next morning the mansion felt colder than usual. The storm clouds had passed, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Elena Moore sat at the breakfast table, untouched coffee cooling beside her. Adrian Blackwell had already left before sunrise, leaving behind a note written in his clean, controlled handwriting. Out for meetings. Do not wait up. She read the line twice. There was something in those 4 words that felt like distance disguised as caution. Hours passed. She tried to distract herself with reading, with music, even with walking through the endless halls of the mansion, but her thoughts kept circling back to the woman from the gala, the one who claimed to know Victoria Hale. By late afternoon, curiosity won over reason. Elena went to the office on the second floor, where Adrian had kept all his old files locked away. The mahogany desk gleamed under the faint light from the window. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the top drawer. Inside were financial ledgers, legal documents, and a stack of letters tied with a black ribbon. The letters were addressed to Victoria Hale. All of them were signed by Adrian. Her breath caught as she unfolded one. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. "You said you feared losing yourself, but I fear something worse, what I become without you." Elena placed the letter down gently, her hands trembling. He had loved her deeply once, maybe still did. But why hide these letters instead of destroying them, unless there was something he could not let go of, or someone he could not forgive? The door opened behind her. She turned quickly, expecting Adrian. But it was the butler, Mr. Lyle, standing there with an expression that carried both fear and warning. "Mom," he said softly, "you should not be in here." "I needed to understand him," Elena replied. The butler hesitated. "Some truths are not meant to be found in drawers. Sometimes they come knocking on their own." Before she could ask what he meant, a loud noise echoed from downstairs, the heavy front doors slamming open. Mr. Lyle went pale. When Elena reached the foyer, Adrian was there, his coat soaked, his expression darker than she had ever seen. "What did you do?" he demanded. She froze. "I did nothing. You went through my office." "How would you know that unless you were watching me?" she said, her voice shaking. His eyes hardened. "Because there are cameras in every room, Elena, including that one." The truth hit her like a cold wave. "You have been spying on me?" "I have been protecting what I cannot lose again," he said. "You do not understand the danger." "What danger?" Before he could answer, the intercom buzzed. A voice from security said, "Sir, there is a woman outside. She says her name is Victoria Hale." The room went silent. Elena's heart stopped for a beat. "That is not possible," she whispered. Adrian turned slowly toward the door. "It should not be," he said under his breath, "but it is." He moved toward the foyer, every step deliberate, the air charged with disbelief. Elena followed, her pulse racing. When the doors opened again, a woman stood on the steps drenched from the rain, her hair dark, her face pale but unmistakably alive. "Hello, Adrian," she said softly. "Did you miss me?" The world seemed to tilt. Adrian's grip tightened on the doorframe. Elena could not breathe. The woman's eyes shifted to her, a faint smile curling at the corner of her lips. "So this is your new wife," Victoria said. "You always did like to replace what you could not fix." Elena stepped back, her thoughts spinning. Nothing made sense anymore. The dead had come back, and the man she thought she was beginning to understand was now a stranger again. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance soft, but promising another storm. The moment Victoria Hale stepped into the mansion, the air changed. The scent of rain and perfume filled the grand foyer, clashing with the cold marble still echoing from the storm. Adrian Blackwell stood frozen, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the woman he had buried 3 years ago. Elena Moore stood beside him, unable to move, her heart pounding so hard it hurt to breathe. "Victoria," Adrian said finally, his voice low but steady. "You should not be here. You were declared dead." Victoria smiled faintly. "You declared me dead, Adrian. There is a difference." Elena's gaze shifted between them. The resemblance between the woman in the painting and the one standing here was undeniable. "You are alive," she whispered. Victoria turned to her, her tone sharp but calm. "So you are the one who replaced me. Tell me, did he warn you too?" Elena frowned. "Warn me about what?" "That he destroys everything he claims to love," Victoria said. Adrian's patience broke. "Enough," he snapped. "You should not have come here. Not like this." She stepped closer, rain still dripping from her coat. "You left me for dead, Adrian. You walked away while the car burned. Do you remember?" His face went pale. "That is not what happened," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You know that is not the truth." Elena looked at him, her voice shaking. "Adrian, what is she talking about?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "The accident was not her fault or mine. Someone tampered with the brakes. By the time I realized, it was too late." Victoria laughed softly, a sound that made the silence colder. "That is your version of the story. Do you want to tell her the rest? About the inheritance? About the clause that only activated if one of us died?" Elena's breath caught. "The inheritance?" Adrian turned toward her, desperate. "Do not listen to her. She is twisting everything." "Am I?" Victoria said, stepping into the light. You forged my death certificate, Adrian. You took the company, the fortune, and you married her to keep the board from investigating. That is a lie, Adrian said sharply. I did it to protect what was left. You disappeared, Victoria. You wanted out. You begged me to let you go. Elena's hands trembled. So which one of you is lying? No one answered. The ticking of the clock was the only sound between them. Finally, Victoria looked at Elena, her eyes filled with something that was not quite anger, not quite pity. You are standing where I used to stand. Let me give you advice. Whatever he promises, whatever he says, do not believe it until you see the truth for yourself. With that, she turned and walked past them, disappearing down the corridor. The echo of her heels faded like a warning. Adrian closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. I never wanted this, he said. I wanted to protect you. Elena shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. From what, Adrian? From her? From you? Or from the truth? He reached for her, but she stepped back. Please, he said softly, just give me time to fix this. Her voice broke. You cannot fix something if you will not tell me what is broken. She turned away before he could answer, walking toward the grand staircase. Each step felt heavier than the last. She needed air, distance, anything to think. Outside, the rain had begun again. She stood under the porch, breathing hard, her thoughts spiraling. Somewhere inside that mansion, two people shared a past built on lies, and she was trapped between them, married to one, haunted by the other. Behind her, lightning flashed, and through the reflection of the glass door, she saw Adrian standing in the hallway, watching her. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something she could not name: fear, guilt, or love. And for the first time since their wedding, Elena realized she no longer knew which of those emotions scared her more. The next hours blurred together in a haze of rain, confusion, and fear. The mansion that once felt cold now felt alive with tension. Every sound echoed through the halls: the wind, the footsteps, the beating of her own heart. Elena Moore had locked herself in the small reading room near the east wing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Victoria Hale was alive. Adrian Blackwell had lied, or at least had hidden too much truth. And now Elena was caught in the center of a storm that was no longer just emotional. It was dangerous. The door opened quietly. Adrian stepped inside, his shirt damp from the rain, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and desperation. Elena, he said softly, you have to listen to me. She stood, her voice trembling. I have done nothing but listen. Now I need the truth. He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Victoria and I built this empire together. But the night of the accident, we discovered that someone inside the company had been stealing from us. I confronted her about it. She wanted to run, to disappear. She took the car before I could stop her. When the police found the wreckage, they said no one could have survived. Elena's eyes narrowed. Then how is she standing in our hallway, Adrian? His voice lowered. Because someone helped her vanish. Someone wanted her gone for good, and me blamed for it. Before she could reply, the intercom crackled to life. Mr. Lyle's voice came through, nervous and strained. Sir, you need to come to the West Wing. There is something you should see. They exchanged a look and hurried down the corridor. When they reached the West Gallery, Victoria was there, standing near a large portrait covered with cloth. Her hands were shaking, a small pistol glinting in the light. Do not come closer, she warned. I know what you did, Adrian. Adrian raised his hands slowly. Victoria, put it down, please. Whatever you think you know, it is not true. You forged the papers, she said, tears mixing with rain on her face. You let the world believe I was dead. You took everything. I took nothing, he said. I was trying to keep you safe from the same people who tried to kill you. Elena's heart pounded as she stepped between them. Stop, this will not fix anything. But Victoria's voice trembled with rage. You have no idea what this man is capable of. He warned me once. I will give you everything you fear. And he did. Victoria, please, Adrian said again. It was your brother. It was Thomas Hale. He wanted control of the company. He sabotaged the car, not me. I found the evidence a month later, but by then you were gone. I did not forge your death certificate. I buried an empty coffin because they said you were beyond saving. Victoria froze. Her hand holding the gun began to shake harder. Thomas? My own brother? Adrian nodded slowly. He sold his shares, took the money, and disappeared. He wanted both of us ruined. I protected what was left. The truth settled like a stone between them. Victoria's arm dropped slightly, confusion overtaking anger. "I did not know," she whispered. "I thought." A sudden crash cut her off. A window shattered behind them, and a figure darted through the broken glass, a man in black, holding a gun. Elena screamed. Adrian pushed her aside as the first shot rang out, hitting the frame above the fireplace. Mr. Lyle burst into the room with 2 guards, tackling the intruder to the ground. When the chaos ended, the man's mask fell off, revealing a familiar face, Thomas Hale. Victoria gasped, her knees giving out. "No, it cannot be." Adrian stood still, breathing hard, his arm bleeding from a graze. "It is over," he said quietly. "The truth always comes back, no matter how long it hides." Elena rushed to his side, pressing a cloth to his wound. He looked at her, and for the first time the wall between them finally cracked. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rumbled faintly, like the last echo of a storm finally ending. The morning after the gunfire, the mansion no longer felt haunted. It felt quiet, peaceful in a way that almost seemed impossible. The police had taken Thomas Hale away before dawn. Victoria had given her statement, her eyes hollow but calm. The lies, the secrets, the years of silence had finally collapsed under the weight of truth. Elena Moore sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fog lift over the lake. For the first time since the wedding, she could breathe without fear. Behind her, footsteps approached softly. Adrian Blackwell stepped into the light, his arm still bandaged, his expression gentler than she had ever seen. "You have not slept," he said quietly. "Neither have you," she replied. "Too much truth to process." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belonged to a man learning how to live again. "The truth," he said, "is heavier than lies, but at least you can carry it without shame." They stood in silence for a moment. The air smelled of pine and wet stone. The chaos of the night before felt distant, almost unreal. Elena turned to him. "What happens now?" He looked out over the water. "Victoria will recover. She deserves peace. And Thomas will answer for what he did." He paused before adding softly, "As for us, I do not know. I do not expect forgiveness." She studied his face. The arrogance, the control, the armor he used to wear, none of it remained. What stood before her now was just a man, flawed and human. "I do not think forgiveness is something you earn," she said. "I think it is something you grow into, one choice at a time." He met her eyes. "And what choice will you make?" Elena smiled slightly. "To stop running from fear. Maybe that was what you meant all along, when you said you would give me everything I fear." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "I meant it as a warning, not a promise. Maybe it became both," she said. "Because I did fear you. I feared losing myself in your world, but now I see that fear can also show you what is worth fighting for." He stepped closer, hesitating as if unsure of his right to reach for her. She closed the distance herself, resting a hand against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her palm. "Do you still want to walk away when the contract ends?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice steady. "Maybe we end the contract, but not the story." He nodded slowly, a quiet understanding passing between them. Later that afternoon, the Blackwell mansion opened its doors for the first time in months. Reporters gathered outside, expecting scandal. Instead, they saw something else. Adrian and Elena stood side by side at the entrance, announcing a new initiative, the rebuilding of the Blackwell Foundation, into a program for art and community healing. "This house has seen enough fear," Adrian said to the crowd. "It is time to turn that fear into purpose." Elena glanced at him, her heart full. She knew the road ahead would not be simple, but it would be real. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she walked back into the old studio. The painting that once haunted her now hung, finished on the wall, a woman standing in the rain, unafraid. Underneath, the signature read, "A. Blackwell." She smiled. For the first time, the painting did not look like her. It looked like freedom. And when Adrian entered the room behind her, she turned and whispered, "You gave me everything I feared, and somehow it became everything I needed." Outside, the last light of day touched the glass windows, turning the whole house golden. The storm had passed, and in its place was peace, the kind that comes only when truth and love finally meet.